A writer is under pressure of deadlines and their own self-doubt. These are constant companions. What happens when the world conspires to squeeze your time? How do we handle it when the winds and rains of life lash out and bang our shutters and cut the power? How do we persevere in life's storms? Every creator understands this. In today's panel, we'll discuss how they make it through until the skies clear. Then, join stalwart C.L. Cannon brings you 4 books you may enjoy if you are a fan of Half Bad by Sally Green. As we wind our way to the end, we check out the coming shows for this week in our Hillman Minute. And right before the end, we find our way into storm-related literature in our epilogue. So put on your raincoat and light that hurricane lamp. It's time for another fantastic episode of This Week in Indies with your host, S.L. Hillman. Hello, everybody. Good Sunday afternoon. I'm S.L. Hillman, your host today. This Week in Indies. We're finishing down for our final spring episodes, which is for life after today. Then this Week in Indies will be on hiatus. If you have a topic you'd like to see covered, or you want to be a panelist, like a great panelist here today, joining now, we can put a contact email in the comments. Today we think about writing lessons, writing in a story. And it's not an ideal situation. It's not just about putting words to paper, but staying focused on all things. Today our panelists will talk about their own tools to put it first, or living in a story, for writing a story. And as they introduce themselves, I'd like to talk about the time they wrote in a literary story. So magic novel, which nonetheless allow them to get some words on the page. So, there we go. We'll start with you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for having me here on This Week in Indies. I am Lily Luchesi. I am a USA Today bestselling author of urban fantasy, paranormal, and mystery novels. I also write fairly sweetish romance as Samantha Calcott and dark romance as S.L. Sinclair. And I am the co-founder and editor at Partners in Crime Book Services.
Awesome. What was that time when you actually had to interact with that person and was really bad number?
I can't hear you. It sounds like you're underwater to me.
Okay.
That's why I was hoping that what you had said was for an introduction. I thought it was just me.
Hey everybody, my name is J.E. Pittman. You can just call me James. I write the Felix Chance series of urban fantasy and also some action sci-fi, a little bit of everything.
Hello, I wasn't paying attention. I'm David Green. I write epic fantasy. I have a series called the Empire of Ruin series. I have an urban fantasy series called Hell in Haven. And I also write cozy fantasy for my agent who sends them out to try to get people to buy them. And I'm looking forward to talking about today's subject.
Hi, I'm Ariel Dawn. I'm also a USA Today bestselling author. I write a little bit of everything across all genres as Ariel, everything from Monsters of Ashwood, which is monster romance, to paranormal romance, to contemporary, to sci-fi romance, to male-male romance, to why choose, pretty much everything in between. And I'm really excited to talk about how to write in a storm today, because that's one of the ways that I write best is with a fire under my butt. So that's me.
Do a little dance or something.
I know, right? I'm like, all of a sudden, I'm like, what do I do?
You'll hear me now?
Yes, better.
Better, yes.
A little better, yeah.
Yeah, a little better. So I will talk to you speak up and make sure, and also speak slowly. Yes. The irony, the fact that the technology has, um,
It's
I would like
starting
to
to
put
cut
in-
out for me again. For you.
Yeah, it was doing good, and then it just kind of like got staticky.
Yeah.
How about now?
Fine in the pre-show.
I'm not sure what the problem is. Give me just 1 second.
Okay.
How about now?
Yep, that's better.
Yes.
That's okay. Okay. So, writing in a storm. Um, oh, where am I at? Okay, yes. So, Lily, let's start with you. Can you think about a time when you were actually, to kind of get things started off, at a time you were writing in a literal storm that made it difficult to write, but you still got some words in?
Oh, we're gonna start this off with one of the most depressing things ever. In 2022, my mother was hospitalized terminally with cancer, and I was on a severe deadline with one of the books that was going to pay some of my bills at the time. So my mother is laying half comatose, half awake in a hospital bed, and I have my laptop with me in a hospital for cancer downtown Chicago, just typing away while sitting by her side, making sure that she's breathing still. And yeah, so I had to write through that. And then when she passed a few weeks later, I had another deadline that was coming the next month. And I had to write through the grief as well, which that, and I'm sure we'll bring that up. That sort of helped because I put all of my pain into my characters instead of myself. But yeah, I still can't read the book that I wrote while she was in the hospital. I've never reread it once, not since my editor sent it back to me.
Looking back, do you think that had that situation, and it's maybe an obvious question, but did it have a long-term effect on your writing, or did things eventually get back to kind of a normal for you?
After that, I didn't write for almost 5 months, so it had a very negative effect. I didn't even want to look at my own manuscripts. I was just working for my clients, editing for my clients. I opened absolutely nothing for months, and eventually, yeah, it's gotten back on track, of course, because I've been publishing since. But it was difficult. I should not have done that.
Thank you for sharing that. JE, what about you?
So quite similar, and actually on the time frame too. October 2022 was the absolute worst month of my life so far. It started off beginning of the month. A dear friend of mine, her cancer came out of remission, and she went into hospice. She wouldn't make it to the end of October. Then on my birthday that month, my dad was diagnosed with cancer, stage 3. Began treatment that month. About 2 weeks later, I lost my best friend suddenly and unexpectedly, and my last uncle. And I didn't even get to go to a couple of the funerals because they were right when Dad started his treatment. So fast forward about 3 years, 2.5. My dad passed in April this year. In the intervening time, I read all 3 of these and one of my other books, because it's kind of one of those things. It's like, and I touch on it in the books. The only way out is through, and I definitely used it as a bit of a, I won't say coping mechanism, but just kind of a way to sort a lot of stuff out.
Right. And were those 3 books in the planning process before that October, or did they come in after?
Felix was. I had started Felix in the summer, kind of as a way to tell stories to a friend of mine who was, hospitalized. So I just kind of came up with this lighthearted, fun stuff that my friend could read while they had nothing else to do. And then I got about 10, because Felix is a serial. It started off as a web serial. So it's episodic. And I had 10 episodes done by that October. And I had started on the next batch of them. I know my friend passed, who was kind of like a writing partner, part of my writing group. And, one of those people you just bounce ideas off of all the time. He made it up until mostly the 20th episode, and that's all he ever saw. So it's one of those things where I kept going. The first Felix is literally about resilience. So I realized later, after I had written them, how much of an impact those events had and the underlying themes of it.
Thank you for sharing that with folks. David, what about you?
I've in a kind of different way. I have been like living with like depression and general anxiety disorder like since I was a young teenager. So I always kind of have, you always having like bouts of that where it kind of peaks quite suddenly and quite kind of strongly, which can kind of get in the way of like, just everything in life, not only the kind of creative process. So that's something that you kind of have to manage because, each one of them, sometimes they can peak together, which is always fun. To be like massively having a massive depressive episode and also being extremely anxious at the same time. But sometimes they take turns, and you have to kind of navigate that and strike when the iron is hot. But sometimes they feed each other as well. Like if you're in a situation where feeling quite depressed at the time, you start to feel anxious because you're not kind of getting the work done that you want to do. Then you start to feel the anxiety of, letting people down and not getting the on your deadlines there and all that kind of stuff. So it can be tricky to navigate. And I kind of had like a perfect storm of it all the start of last year when I burnt myself out, which was the problem. And I still had a book to write. And because I'd burnt myself out, I was quite sick. I got pneumonia. I got a couple of different infections. I was, completely burnt out as well. And then I was also quite heavily depressed, and I was feeling extremely anxious about health and about everything else, and was also trying to write a book to deadline. So it was difficult to do. And like everyone else with that book in particular, it's a book that people like, but it's one that I don't think of very often, and it's not one that I would like to go back and read. Because like for me, when I see people kind of talking about it, and it was recently nominated for an award as well, which was kind of funny, but because for me, it was just any time that I think about it, I think of an extremely difficult time in my life, and I didn't really get any joy from writing it. It just had to be done. I'm glad other people enjoy it, but it's not something that I like to it's not one that I would ever go back and read my own work very often anyway, but it's one that I probably, if I had to, it would be at the very, very bottom of my list of things to read.
Gotcha. Understood. Thank you for sharing that with us. And congratulations on the nomination for the award. I don't think I mentioned that earlier.
Thanks very much.
Ariel?
Okay. So there's two parts to this. The first, we kind of have to mention that like I mentioned before, I do work really well under pressure. It's not something I like about myself. It just happens to be that's how my brain works. It doesn't really start to kick in until I know that there's a fire. And I've written many books this way, right? So it's like one of the things that, in a sense, I'm known for. However, I kind of had to put that to the test. In 2023, I was kind of barreling towards what I like to call Burnout City. Because I was not dealing with my ADHD. I was not dealing with my anxiety particularly very well yet. And so I was kind of like in this massive state that I was writing all of these books. I had all these deadlines. I was pushing deadlines, and things were a bit chaotic. And then just as I thought they kind of couldn't get worse, I found myself on the shoals of an entirely new adventure where I ended up leaving my job of 13 years to pursue being a writer full time, but I was nowhere near ready. And my hand was kind of forced in that situation. I've been struggling with my job for a while at that time. And so upon leaving that, I suffered severe depression, severe anxiety, because I did not know how I was going to do this. Like I said, I wasn't anywhere ready to do it financially. I wasn't anywhere ready to do it, emotionally, mentally. And the universe kind of forced my hand. And it was a really rough couple of months because I went straight from having a secure job for 13 years to all of a sudden not knowing if my books were going to sell, if I was going to make enough royalties. So it was extremely frustrating, obviously, to go from that transition. And then during all of that, I was starting to tour. I was starting to do book signings and events. And I went to my first book signing event probably about a week or two after I had left my job. So it was kind of a bittersweet thing. And I wasn't necessarily in probably the right headspace to do an event, but I was like, hell or high water, I have to do this, right? And through the next couple months, things just kind of progressively started to get a little bit more tumultuous. I was, like I said, I was doing events. So I was like going to sell these books. I still didn't know what I was doing. My husband ended up getting really ill. We weren't sure what was wrong with him. Doctors kept saying it was COVID, but it wasn't. And it turns out it was Lyme disease. So I was writing in hotel rooms, cars, hospital waiting rooms. And writing for me has always been kind of that solace. And kind of like other people have touched on, I kind of poured myself into my work during that time. Even though I wasn't sure I was going to meet my deadlines, I felt like everything was just in a sense spiraling out of my control. The only thing I could control was the world that I dove into. And despite all of the massive burnout, despite all of the tumultuous chaos going on, I managed to publish 23 books that year. So I always kind of look back on that time and say that even I know when things are, when things are down for the count and it's not going well, I know what I'm capable of, because of that. So.
Right. Do you think you would have published more books or less books had those situations been different?
I don't know. I like to think I probably would have published a couple more because there were definitely a couple that I pushed off, because I was like, well, this one has to get done first. And I ended up, I think during that time, there was a book I wrote in the span of 2 weeks. I dictated it. And then I went through and cleaned it up and edited it because I kept pushing the deadline because I was just all over the place. And so I think definitely because I probably took some things off my plate, I probably would have published a little bit more had I not been, kind of in a state of chaos for several months. I want to say about 6 months. It was pure chaos.
Understood. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go to our comments first. Joe always chiming in, send a star to your hosts and producers. Even when their technology is not working correctly. Vanessa says hello. Hello, Vanessa. Dale Mengo says hello. Hello. There's a bunch where people can't hear what I'm saying. So go past those ones. Miss Elishaful, good to see you again. Thanks for being here. A.L. Mengel talking about some of their struggles as well. Thank you for sharing that. And 23 books. Yeah, 23 books is a lot. But everybody has their number, I guess.
That was my most productive year. I haven't since, but I think a lot of it was because I did put so much of my energy into the books because of what I was going through. So,
Right. Understood. So, Ari, let's start with you again for this one. Can you tell us, or can you share with folks some of the techniques, a little bit more refined, that you used while you were in that storm? To go ahead and get words to page. You mentioned dictation. You mentioned some other things.
So I tend to suffer from migraines, and sometimes when I do get them, they are debilitating, and I cannot even look at a screen. And I also suffer from carpal tunnel. So during some of this, obviously, as I was going through the chaos, some of these things were becoming more heightened because of stress and, sitting for 12 hours in front of a screen. So I ended up, when I was having those moments, I ended up trying dictation. And dictation for me was just opening my Google Docs and using voice to text to be able to just kind of get the ideas out when I couldn't type or I couldn't look at a screen. And then later I would go in and I would just kind of clean everything up and add everything in, and then send it to an editor. I don't normally dictate. I really kind of now to this day only do it when I am either on a crunch or when I can't look at a screen or my hands are just, I just can't type. But for the most part, I utilize that a lot. And then another technique that I used is kind of something I've developed over time, and it really helped me during that time, is chunking. Which comes from my ADHD and former learning disabled techniques of kind of just chunking information. So I started giving myself prompts. I knew what I was going to write before I wrote it, like when my brain was there. So I would open up a document and I would have in red text, it would say, this character it needs to go through this particular plot point and this needs to happen. And it was more of like a little summary. And then I just kind of like reference that. And that kind of helped me keep on track and keep the books flowing so that I could meet the deadlines.
Sure. Awesome. David, what about you? What are some of the techniques that you've used to kind of navigate the issues that you deal with when they get, especially when they get really intense?
Yeah. Well, it's a funny thing because, books and writing books and stories is like one of my special interests anyway. Because I'm autistic and I have a few very strong special interests that are like a happy place for me to go to. So a lot of time is just trying to remind myself of that, that the reason why I'm doing it is because I enjoy doing it. It's an escape for me. I enjoy creating, I enjoy writing stories. So it's kind of getting into that mindset, which is difficult because it's if it was easy, then we wouldn't have these kind of problems where we find it hard to navigate and we find these creative blocks. So a lot of it is, when my kind of pace of work was a lot more intense, because I have kind of like lessened my output in the last couple of years. Well, particularly since the start of last year. Where I was I was ghostwriting, I was doing my own stuff. So I was writing probably around 15 books a year. The shortest being like 80,000 words, the longest being 280,000 words, and I'd be writing a couple of books at the same time. And a lot of that was coming from this thing of, it was coming from anxiety and autism as well of I need to prove that I have some kind of self-worth, and my self-worth is by being productive. And if I'm not being productive, then I'm not providing, and I'm not worthy of just, doing what I need to do. And so what I've kind of got into the mindset of through, and a lot of this is through therapy, which I've been in and out of therapy for most of my adult life, is accepting the fact that it's okay not to do anything sometimes. It's okay to take a rest. It's okay. You deserve to take a rest. You deserve to take some downtime. And, process is different from everyone. There is no right or wrong way. But I've very much gotten into the mindset now of I don't have to write every single day. If I'm writing 5 days out of 7, that is completely fine. I can take 2 days just to do other things and just to relax and let the batteries recharge a little bit and not get into that position of being burnt out, because to an extent I can handle the depression, to an extent I can handle the anxiety, but when the burnout comes in that as well, it heightens everything else, and it heightens my autism as well, where I kind of go into shutdowns and find it very, very hard to kind of function as people would expect. So it's knowing not to get to that point and knowing to take breaks and knowing that being kind of realistic and not punishing myself for by setting such insane goals, and just just having that kind of thing of it's great to write several books a year. It's fantastic to be productive, but it's also remembering that a lot of people have a goal of writing a book in their life and they never do it. Right. And everyone on here is writing multiple books all of the time, and we're achieving things from doing that. So it's being kind to yourself, and I think kindness to ourselves is something that is a very overlooked but much needed thing in life in general.
I agree 100% with that. Because you recently had new covers for your series, did that doing something like that help, or did it help the situation? Did it make you feel like you were doing something, at least fun, or that was just a goal that you had in mind anyway?
Yeah, it was fun because it wasn't just new covers. It was I rewrote the first book in the series because it was my first, which is the one that's on the graphic there. It was the first book that I'd ever written, and I'd always had that. After I wrote that one and I wrote the second one, I wrote a few other books in between that, some ghostwriting ones, some for my other series. And I felt like I was a better and more experienced writer when I wrote the second and the next ones. And so I was always a little bit unhappy with that jump of quality between the first and second in my mind. So I always wanted to go back and write it. And with last year, it was quite a struggle. As I mentioned before, I only really kind of wrote one book of my own. And then started a second one, which was I didn't finish until this year, which is very, very slow. I've done a couple of ghostwriting books, but I don't really kind of count those. So it was that kind of thing, and I started this new one, which I finished this year, which is all about being kind to people and being kind to yourself. It's about therapy through writing and stuff like that. It's a fantasy world's first therapist for adventures. But it wasn't kind of going very well. I was still kind of struggling with some things. So when I went to this project, the In Solitude Shadow, and so kind of when I got the rights back and was kind of self-publishing them and rewriting the first one, it was great because it was something that it had a very, very kind of defined perimeter of this. I know what it's going to be. I know that it's not going to be too sprawling because it's the story has already been told. I'm just embellishing certain parts and rewriting certain parts. But what it also helped in terms of self-worth and kind of experience-wise was that I was looking at it and I could clearly see the things that I had done that I could do better. And I could clearly see I hadn't looked at this book in 4 years or something like that. And I was looking at it and I could see where to improve it. And it was showing me that when I was working through it, that I was like, you know what, I have gotten better at this. I am a better storyteller than I was 4 years ago. My skill has increased. So it was really nice. And it was a great way to start the year, actually. And it was a very, very positive way to start the year. And that kind of then I went back to the project that I was kind of struggling with, and I went into it with kind of like fresh eyes and kind of a bit more confidence and a little bit more enthusiasm for it. And I was like a little bit less doubt. and that was because of just taking on like a project like that. So it was nice. It's not something that I'm going to do very often. I don't think I'm going to go back and start rewriting books just for a bit of a pep talk for myself. But it was good to do.
What are some of the techniques you use to go ahead and make it through the rough times?
So, as far as like the techniques to actually write the book, I have an app. I tend to write on like just a plain text editor app. It's called Bear, and it just syncs between my mobile devices. I like that clean interface, etc. But the thing it lets me do, whenever I have my iPad and my keyboard, I can sit down like in treatment rooms and write while Dad's just kind of napping, getting his chemo or fluids or whatever the daily's treatment is. If I'm just sitting around and I have ideas, I can write on my phone, and it syncs to what I was working on the iPad. I know before I left my day job, at the very beginning when Dad was just starting treatment and everything was mostly okay, I would just have my phone and like pace the hall during my break and write on my phone. I love being able to just write wherever I am and whenever the idea hits me, because I know some people have to be in that certain physical space, but for me, it's a head space. And I know it's a kind of a trick to be in that physical space to trigger the headspace, but if you need to get away from something, it's easy to dive into the text. Another thing that I did, I mentioned I wrote Felix as a serial first. So if anybody's unfamiliar with the term, serialized stories, basically think short stories with the same characters, like the old Sherlock Holmes novels, things of that nature, where it's the same cast of characters going through different adventures, very much like a TV show. So what I found beneficial with that, I could write my stories beginning, middle, and end, and 1,500 words, 5,000 words, however long that particular episode needed to be to tell the story. And I was done with that episode, in place of trying to maintain consistent, arcs and, all that through the course of a 80,000 word novel. I broke it up into a bunch of chunks and did do the major story arcs amongst the chunks of story, but that way I was actually finishing stuff and putting stuff out and was able to complete things and basically put a pin in it if I needed to. Say, I wrote an episode and then Dad had a particularly tough week and I didn't get back to anything. And I don't know, whoever's making noise, if you can mute your mic, it's kind of distracting. Sorry. It was one of those things where if I got distracted by something, I might lose the thread. And being able to write in an episodic was, I could finish a story in a day if I needed to, or if I wanted to, or a couple days, and then take a break and then dive back in and just have to worry about cleaning up a little bit of the voice between episodes versus maintaining it over the course of a full novel. I don't write super fast long. I write very fast short. So it's one of those things where I finished a novella in a week. I can finish I finish most Felix in like a month, usually when I set myself a deadline. So it's one of those things where you don't know what life's going to bring you. So if you're able to piece it out, then you can get through a lot faster, get through a lot better. I think.
Right. And that sounds too, for folks who, I know for me, if I get an idea, I might lose that idea between the time I'm driving or where I'm at and then getting back to, like you mentioned, that space. But the ability to write on your phone and sync that up, you don't have to necessarily lose those ideas or threads that you were working on when you were not, quote unquote, in the writing space.
Exactly. It's great for syncing, and it's also, I found, great for refining, because I am one of those the cyclical writers who I will write a fair bit and then I'll go back and fix it, and then write a fair bit and go back and fix it and probably never touch it again after that. That's another reason I like the serialized format, because I'm not tempted to go back and change everything as I'm going. So it helps me actually make progress. Like, oh, this chapter's out and set in stone, I'll move on to the next. And it's out and set in stone, we'll move on to the next. So I will write a lot, like on my iPad, on my keyboard, like a lot of the bulk of the text, and then I'll be able to like skim through on my phone and like make little quick edits or quick tweaks or whatever on the finished product. And then also, like you said, I get that flash of inspiration. I pull over in a parking lot and I just sit there on my phone and type it out for whatever, or now do voice to text sometimes, since it's gotten better at understanding me.
Very envious of people who can write on their phones or other smaller mobile devices, because I just cannot do it. Thank you for sharing that with us. Lily, share us a little bit of your techniques.
So I feel like I should preface this by saying I live with autism, ADHD, chronic depression, and chronic anxiety, and also some physical conditions as well. And my anxiety also manifests physically. So I have been, from the moment I started writing, like David, writing and books are my special interest and have been literally since I taught myself how to read at age 2. So writing and books to me are a way to survive. So I think that the way I approached things was a bit differently because I needed to write. If I did not have that anchoring me down, I think I would have spiraled even worse than I actually did after the writing was done, because knowing my mother was sick and having to take care of her and doing a lot of these things, it made the anxiety and it also made the autism worse. It affected things very negatively. So writing for me was a way to center myself and calm down and like just be somewhere that wasn't my present. So that was one of the things that specifically helped me. But like James said, as long as I had my laptop or my phone, I could write from anywhere. When my depression was at its worst, before everything happened with my mom, I was actually writing 100,000 word novels in 2 weeks, because I would not leave my computer. I just wanted to write. I just wanted to create. I just wanted to not be in my own head, because I'm allergic to medication. Nothing else really worked. I wasn't doing therapy at the time. So writing was what kept me alive for most of my life. And it's also what kept me sane while my mother was sick. It was my brain telling me escape, 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 escape. And so that's kind of what it was. And then, I also did have a bit of the financial incentive where it's like, if I don't finish this book, I'm going to lose out on, some money that I desperately need at the moment because of everything going on. But for me, it was just do the work, just get out of your brain. And in hindsight, I actually think that was the only time in my life that it wasn't a good idea. My therapist did not like that. I went to grief therapy for a little over a year, and she was like, you actually need to feel those feelings. You can't hide them away. You can't put them in a book. It's not enough. And I realized I delayed my own healing by forcing myself to write so much. And I still have an issue writing. I don't write like I used to. Where I used to do 100,000 words in 2 weeks, I can maybe do 50,000 in a month. And it's not the same anymore. When you are dealing with something that is a severe trigger like illness and death, or your mental health is just getting worse in general, because we have to remember, like myself, not everyone who has mental health issues has them only during a storm. I live in a constant storm. There's a storm in my head every second of every day. I am actually very medicated right now. I have been having an anxiety attack since I got home yesterday. Like, I went and didn't work for 2.5 days. I went to a couple concerts. I had a great time with my friend, and I was masking so hard that when I came home, I crashed. So that's another issue that, affects people like us. It's a constant storm. Sometimes we can put an umbrella up and it doesn't hit us directly, but the storm is always inside. So if you're someone watching this, if you're a creator watching this and it's like, how do I create when I'm always feeling like complete and total shit? I don't have a tip or a trick, but all I can say is sit down and let your characters talk to you. Let your characters speak to you. Listen to them. Don't listen to that part of your brain, because the part of our brains that have anxiety and depression are not the creative parts. So those are different functions. Shut that part off. Put a little curtain down over. Like a bird cage when you want a bird to go to sleep. Do that to that part of your brain. Metaphorically, picture it. And just start listening to your characters. They do want to talk, and they do actually want to help you. Even if the story is driving you crazy. I have my work in progress right now is driving me absolutely insane. And if also you can give your characters a little bit of what you're going through and kind of work through it. When I wrote my book, Yijun, which was the one I wrote right after my mother passed, I started writing it right when she got sick. And then I put it aside. I had other deadlines. And finally that deadline was coming up right after she passed. And it was going to release not long after. And I had to finish it. And so what went from a very cute, fluffy story turned into my main character using the man that she's with, who I based off a musician who helped me through the hard times. It wound up being her being with him and him helping her heal. And I have had readers write me and say that it helped them process grief as well. So yeah, if you're a writer going through, because my other characters, Angelica Cross in Stakeout, she suffers from severe depression and PTSD for multiple things. And so, I put some of my emotions into her as well. Channel everything that you feel. It's going to be hard. It's going to be very hard. It's going to be painful. Channel those things that you feel, and your work will shine, even if it's not what you wanted to do. Because that's the only way to get everything out. You have to sit with your emotions, process, and write through them. And I think that if you're, or whatever creator you are, if you're an artist, if you paint, if you're a musician, whatever type of creator you are, channel these emotions, but don't let them control the narrative. Don't let them take that joy from you. I did let them take that joy from me for a bit. And it's hard. It's a work in progress, but you will feel better once you figure out how to communicate your emotions through your art. Art heals. I have a tattoo. It says "art saves" my arm, and it really does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, it does. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I think too, that's interesting that you mentioned listen to your characters instead of your the other parts of your brain. That's an interesting way to characterize it.
Yeah, I don't know if every author is the same, but everyone that I've talked to, a lot of us say our characters are in our heads, and we kind of converse with them. Most of my clients are that way. So if you're one of those authors, just talk to your characters, and they're going to talk to you.
Absolutely. All right, so let's go ahead and take a bit of a break from our conversation, and we'll go with this week's Indie Connection.
Hey guys, Seal Cannon here from Fiction Atlas Press, bringing you another Indie Connection. And today I'd like to tell you about some indie books that you might enjoy if you're a fan of Half Bad by Sally Green. The first book I have for you is called The Hollow Gods by A.J. Verana. Black Hollow is a town with a dark secret. For centuries, residents have foretold the return of the Dreamwalker, an ominous figure from local folklore said to lure young women into the woods and possess them. Yet the boundary between fact and fable is blurred by a troubling statistic. Occasionally, women do go missing, and after they return, they almost always end up dead. When Kai wakes up next to the lifeless body of a recently missing girl, his memory blank, he struggles to clear his already threadbare conscience. Maya, a floundering university student, experiences signs that she may be the Dreamwalker's next victim. Can she trust Kai as their paths collide, or does he herald her demise? And after losing a young patient, crestfallen oncologist Mason embarks on a quest to debunk the town's superstitions, only to find his sanity tested. A maelstrom of ancient grudges, forgotten traumas, and deadly secrets loom in the foggy forests of Black Hollow. Can three unlikely heroes put aside their fears and unite to confront a centuries-old evil? Will they uncover the truth behind the fable, or will the cycle repeat? The second book I have for you is called Bones and Bourbon by Dorian Graves. Rhett's Gallows has been possessed by an ancient necromancer for almost his entire life. He's used to wicked schemes and body-stealing shenanigans, but waking up to a unicorn head in his passenger seat is a new low. Now he's forced to carry out a gilded menagerie's dirty deeds, but the task brings him face to face with the hope he'd long given up on, his older brother. Jared Gallows left home to rescue Rhett's from possession. Instead, he's saddled with a dead-end job as a paranormal investigator, a fairy curse, and a daredevil boyfriend who might be from another world. At least he's got a new case to keep himself busy. But why has his brother reappeared? And why does this sudden reunion feel more like a bane than a blessing? To survive, the half-hundred Gallows brothers will have to escape the forces toying with their lives, as well as the wrath of carnivorous unicorns, otherworldly realms, and even their own parents. Only time will tell if they'll make it out alive or sober. The third book I have for you is called White Trash Warlock by David R. Slayton. Not all magicians go to schools of magic. Adam Binder has the sight. It's a power that runs in his bloodline. The ability to see beyond this world and into another, a realm of magic populated by elves, gnomes, and spirits of every kind. But for much of Adam's life, that power has been a curse, hindering friendships, worrying his backwoods family, and fueling his abusive father's rage. Years after his brother Bobby had him committed to a psych ward, Adam is ready to come to grips with who he is, to live his life on his terms, to find love, and maybe even use his magic to do some good. Hoping to track down his missing father, Adam follows a trail of cursed artifacts to Denver, only to discover that an ancient and horrifying spirit has taken possession of Bobby's wife. It isn't long before Adam becomes the spirit's next target. To survive the confrontation, save his sister-in-law, and learn the truth about his father, Adam will have to risk bargaining with very dangerous beings, including his first love. And the last book I have for you is called Hollow Heathens, Book of Blackwell, by Nicole Fiorina. Once upon a time there lived a girl named Fallon, who was taken far away from home shortly after she was born. A home that held more than strange traditions and bizarre superstitions. 24 years later, she returned to Weeping Hollow, a town she'd only heard about in stories during restless nights under a marble moon, to take care of her last living relative. They called the nosy mortician a freak show, a ghastly thing. They said I couldn't go near her. Still, there was this aching pull to Fallon Grimaldi that I couldn't escape. A nostalgic pull, as if we'd been here before. Once upon a time there lived a mysterious boy named Julian, with a curse as old as centuries wrapped around his soul. He was one of the 4 hollow heathens, the very dark creatures who caused the town's people to live in fear. And the Blackwell name was stained with darkness and death. They called him a monster, cold and hollow. They said I shouldn't go near him. Still, there was this aching pull to Julian Blackwell that I couldn't escape. A nostalgic pull, as if we'd been here before. Okay, that's all for me this week. I'll see you next week on the Indie Connection. Bye.
Alrighty then. Severed unicorn head. That sounds exciting to me. I don't know about other folks, but you know. All right, let's go talk about, or let's look at some of our comments that we've had from our viewers. Vanessa mentions fastest writing for her. Oops, hold on. And then A.L. Mangle talking a little bit more about some of their situations, right? An interesting one from Vanessa. She often sometimes forgets that she likes writing. Agreed. I mean, I love writing too, and some days it's like, uh, this is terrible. Why did I even pick up a quote unquote pen to do this? It's a little bit like that with game design too. But I have a friend who has designed many, and he's like, game design is a disease, right?
Mhm.
Once you catch the disease, you can never really get rid of it. And Vanessa loves research a little too much. Can you ever love research too much? I don't know about that.
Mhm.
Cherry Alakai, research is my favorite rabbit hole to go down. Yep, for sure. That research is fun. A.L. Mingle, the research is definitely my rabbit hole. Yep.
Mhm.
Talking a little bit more about that. And mentioning some of the other things A.L. is talking about. Also takes notes on his phone. Yep. Again, I envy you people who can write on phones. My hands were not built for that. 1,000 words in 5 years. Yeah, some people obviously go different paces. I can write 5,000 words in about 3 hours, and when I don't do that, this is where I punish myself. I'm like, well, you can do it. Why don't you do that every day, right?
Mhm.
And it's
Or if you do
obviously
it in
not.
English, you're accused of using ghostwriters, like I used to be.
Mhm.
Those always
Yeah.
comments. How do you write all of those? What do you use? What do you like? I use my hands. It
I
hurts.
get that a lot too because I write a lot. Yeah, or they, accuse you of other stuff too. So
I talked to you about that before, I believe.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's one of those things. It's like people underestimate what goes into those 5,000 words. It's like how much, back brain processing while you're doing everything else. That's how I write in, pertinent to the conversation. I write in storms. I will write a book in a week or whatever, but maybe, dealing with like 3 weeks of doctor's appointments before that.
Right.
Or, until I can get to where I can write that fast. Before all this happened, I was able to produce reliably about 2,500 words a day. Now it comes out either 500 word dribbles or 10,000 word storms until I can get back on pace because, right since Dad's passing in April, I've been, like Lily was talking about, I stopped everything that I was currently working on. I didn't have any deadlines for them. I just put them down and I started writing something completely new in case I associated that trauma with that book. Like, I'm not writing my mainline Felix series that I will have to interact with for the next dozen plus years while I'm in that headspace, because I don't want to revisit that headspace when I have to go back and figure out what the characters were doing at that time or what have you. So I started a project that's entirely completely different that I'm currently about 10,000 words into. It's kind of fun, but it's going to be a standalone project. It will not be a series, I think.
Right, when you're trying to avoid that darkness and everything being touched, like that's why the ones that I did write, the one was a second of a duology, so I don't have to write anymore for that, and the other one was also a standalone, it was first in a shared world. I don't have to write any more of that, so that also helped a lot. Now I'm able to put things, it's just turned 3 years since my mother passed, and I'm finally now able to put like things for her in my book and be happy about it instead of miserable. And again, it's with the autism plus that, it made it very difficult to not want to write certain things because my brain is like, this is your special interest. You have to enjoy this. But my heart is like, okay, I can't enjoy this. So it's very hard when you're dealing with multiple chronic disorders at the same time, plus a storm that comes in.
Yep. I'm all too familiar with that struggle. I cope with it as well.
And I think too, sometimes it's important to remember that writing itself is a mental exercise, right? Like your brain is, you work it the same way you work other parts of your body, right? So when we have outside interference or things that affect us mentally, of course that's going to affect the way that we write. And so it's one of those things that it's almost like, I hate to say it, like the more you do it, the easier it gets, because that sounds so cliche, but it's almost just like a reprogramming of how to go about it and how to mentally exercise it so that it doesn't become, something that, like you said, like you don't want to do, right? Because it can be so cathartic. And I think part of that is just trying to figure out how to pull certain energies and focus them into other spots. And because it is a mental exercise and we have, outside interference, that can be difficult. But I think the important thing to remember too is that like progress is progress no matter what it looks like. So I might write 10,000 words today because I was super into it and I was feeling it and I needed to get all of those emotions out. But tomorrow I might write nothing, and that's progress too. So, to kind of just reframe that.
Absolutely. David, any last thoughts?
Yeah, I just think going back to that kindness thing, just being kind to yourself. I mean, I know because I've done it before, I can write 20,000 words in a day. I know I can do that, but do I want to do it every day? Should I do it every day? I could run a marathon, right? Should I do it every day? Could I? No, I shouldn't. I could eat a McDonald's, an extra large McDonald's meal for every single meal of my day. I've probably done that before in my past. Should I do it every day? Probably not, right? So it's just one of those things, like only because you know that you've done something before and you are capable of it, it doesn't mean that you should be doing the same thing every single day, right? And it's just as Ariel said, some days you might do that 5,000, 6,000 days and it's great, right? The next day it might be 500 words. It's still progress, right? I know he recently died. Unfortunately, he's a prolific crime writer in Ireland called Ken Bruin. He wrote the Jack Taylor books that were on Netflix a while ago, and his method was he would write 2 pages every single day. He'd get up in the morning, he'd have his breakfast, he'd write 2 pages, and then he'd record them in a dictaphone. And then at night time, he'd listen to them before he went to bed. If he liked it, he would keep them. If he didn't like it, he would get rid of them and redo the 2 pages. And he said he'd do that every single day, 2 pages, and by the end of the year, he'd have a book. And that was it. That's how he did it every year for 40 years. Everyone is different. Every process is different, but it's just that thing of sometimes being in competition is healthy and being competitive is good, but it's also knowing when not to compete with yourself and knowing that today it's okay to do nothing. Today it's okay to do 100 words. Today it's okay just to read over what I did yesterday, and just doing that and being happy with the pace that you're setting yourself.
Great. I appreciate everybody sharing their techniques and their struggles, and in all ways, everybody talks. I think this show is good for people talking about their personal struggles as well, and I appreciate the fact that you all do that. We won't do epilogue this week, but we will. Hold on. I should probably plan this better. Do our Go Indie Minute. All right, so this week, coming up on Go Indie Now, to get my list, which again I probably should have had prepared. Here we go. Okay, so Sunday night tonight, these are all Eastern times, 8 p.m. Eastern, Working the Indies with special guest John Hartness. Joe will be with John Hartness as we look at one indie promotion trying to be unique and honor one soul that was. Tomorrow night, Monday at 7 p.m., Spotlight on the Multiverse with Paige L. Christie and Jessica Nettles. You won't be disappointed. They're both great guests. Tuesday night at 8, the season finale of First Time for Everything with Juliette Rose as she welcomes Ryan Knoll. Thursday night at 8, Behind the Scenes, all-female produced indie TV show Chasers, takes us through the process of creating a one-camera, single-shot episode. That should be exciting because film is something I'm interested in. If I had time when I wasn't writing, I would do that too. Friday night at 10, late night news with Joe Compton and Vanessa Junta. Hello, Vanessa. I know you're in our comments today. Updates you on the latest indie news. Saturday matinee at 6 on the red carpet with indie horror film Portal to Hell. Should be good. And then back next Sunday at noon for another This Week in Indies with Joe Compton as we build a villain. Build a villain should be a good time. All right, I want to thank everybody for being here with today. Let's get our last few comments. Stefan gave us a star. Appreciate that, Stefan. Vanessa gave a yay, right? And yes, this week's lineup does sound great. Thank you for that. Okay, Ariel, starting with you, where can people find you on the web?
You can find me pretty much everywhere you buy books. You can find me at ariel-dawn.com. You can find me frequently here on Go Indie Now and as a regular panelist over at Continual. And I am on pretty much every social platform you can think of. So either as author Ariel Dawn or Ariel Dawn.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing with us today.
Thank you.
David?
Hi, you can find me, the best place to find me is on my website, davidgreenwriter.com. It's got links to all of my things on the internet, what are they called? Social medias, that's the word. And it also has all my books as well. They're all available on Kindle Unlimited. So even if you don't want to read them, just get them on Kindle Unlimited, flick through them all, and give me some money. That'd be great.
Perfect. Thank you, David. Thank you for being here and sharing with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
J.E.?
Yeah, great strategy, David. You can find me online at halfacrepond.com or on the socials, Facebook's J.E. Pittman Writes. All the rest are j.e.pittman. I will be on a few continual panels. I'll be on some other podcasts. I will be at probably your favorite local con. I get around, as a lot of people can tell you. So yeah, just come find me. Look for Felix on a canvas bag. I'll have books or something else fun in there for you.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing with us, and thanks for being here today. And Lily.
Thanks again for having me. Again, I am Lily Lucchesi. You can find me at lilyluchesi.com. There are links to all of my books there, all of my other social medias. I'm most active on Facebook and Instagram right now, trying to get active on Threads. And you can also find Partners in Crime Book Services, where I provide editing, formatting, graphic design, and other assorted small tasks by going to payhip.com/Partners in Crime Book Services. Or you can just go to my website here and send me a message and say, hey, I want to know about, whatever services. And also, as S.L. Sinclair, please keep a lookout for The Family Sins, which is the new trilogy that I am beginning, which will be out at the end of July, and I'm going to start promoting that very soon. So if you're into dark romance, stay tuned because I have a lot of great things coming up.
I know we have a lot of dark romance readers who watch and listen to this. As always, because I haven't changed in the last hour, I'm S.M. Hillman. You can find me here as a host. You can find me later in the month as a panelist on This Week in Indies. I also host Zero Means You're Dead. We should have a new one coming up in July. It's part of our RPG lineup, and there should be, I think, 2 Hit the Dice coming up this month for one, the RPG Ronin, and the second one, more of our cryptid Bob and Goose Cryptid Capture Core. I can't remember the name of it. But anyway, if you like role-playing games, it's coming up this month. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Thanks, our panelists, as always. Thanks for everyone for putting up with the technical issues. That's sometimes on the road. It gets a little weird. Thanks for everyone for hanging in. Vanessa, thanks, everyone, as well. Thank you, Vanessa, for being here. And it's always time to go indie now. See you next week, folks.